The next day, over our very fine lunch of Twinkies, corn chips, and a 2-liter bottle of pineapple Faygo, we huddled together in the dining room, plotting our next move. We decided to leverage Nancy's valuables, including her gold candlestick holders and the many other expensive items scattered throughout the mansion, to generate quick cash. However, we opted to steer clear of Nancy's debit and credit cards for the time being, wary of setting off fraud alerts. Instead, we brainstormed a long-term strategy to gradually gain control of the mansion and dispose of its current occupant in a manner that would leave no trace and raise no red flags. I was for getting her hooked on heroin and putting her in an insane asylum. But Josh said the matter required a more finessed approach if we didn't want to get caught. We would have to figure out a way to make it look like the old woman's cheese slid off her cracker without our intervention. The harder part would be to fake the documents necessary for Josh to pass as a long-lost Franklin heir. We would keep the old woman alive and relatively healthy until we tied up all of the loose ends to our plan. A day later, Josh and I hit up a pawn shop, a thrift store, and a day spa in a nearby town. We snagged a squeaking used wheelchair from the pawn shop, some better clothes from the thrift store, and beauty treatments from the spa for ourselves. And this was the best part of this messed up story. The massages and pampering were pure heaven. On our way back to Dead Tree, we got our hands on some mind-numbing street drugs through less than ethical means. We planned to use them to make Nancy appear to be a helpless stroke victim. Nancy had been tied up on her bed that day, and I had stuffed a wad of bath towels between her legs if she needed to pee. If she had to poop, she was on her own. Her general well-being was of no great concern to me. A week later, we wheeled a dazed Nancy through the busy streets of Dead Tree. Our act was quite convincing, and we appeared to fool everyone we passed by. Josh and I strolled down the sun-drenched streets of the center of town. A floppy straw hat we found in a dumpster was set at a jaunty angle atop Nancy's drooping head, our charade in full swing. I pushed smelly Nancy along in the creaking wheelchair, her body slumped, her eyes glazed over, and a water bottle straw positioned within her drooling, open mouth. Although it was summer and rather hot, we dressed her in an oversized thrift store cardigan, adding to the illusion of a frail old scarecrow in need of assistance. I thought it was totally hilarious the way we mistreated that old lady. She would pay dearly for hurting Josh and for viciously battling our attempts to invade her home and her life. As we passed by a group of chatty old women, Josh flashed a friendly smile. "Morning, ladies. Lovely day, isn't it?" The neighbors returned the greeting with nods and smiles, some gasping in shock at the sight of the shambolic, wheelchair-bound Nancy. "Oh, I'm sure you know Nancy," Josh said cheerily. "I'm Josh, her nephew, and this is Lisa, my wife." I chimed in, my voice filled with false warmth. "Yes, indeed. We're just taking Nancy here for a little stroll. Doctor's orders, you know." One of the neighbors, Mrs. Jenkins, peered at Nancy with concern and said, "Oh my, poor dear. Is she all right?" Josh nodded reassuringly. "Oh, she's just fine. She just needs a bit of fresh air, that's all. Our Aunt Nancy recently had a stroke. Her attorney contacted us to come stay with her indefinitely to take care of her needs." Both my wife and I had full lives and busy work commitments, but we dropped everything to come and support my favorite aunt. Mrs. Jenkins nodded sympathetically, her gaze lingering on the non-ambulatory Nancy's pale face, bent head, and lifeless stare. She returned her attention to Josh and I. She said, "Well, you're good people for looking after her. Not many folks would take on this responsibility. Your aunt wasn't exactly sociable to the townsfolk." I offered a grateful smile and sweetly murmured, "It's our pleasure, really. Nancy here is family, and that's just what we do. She and my husband were very close when he was a little boy." "Well, God bless you both. You're just a pair of angels. That's what you are," another woman chimed in. As the conversation ended, Josh discreetly slipped another small pill into Nancy's water bottle. Ensuring that she remained subdued for the duration of our outing should we run into more nosy neighbors. I laughed to myself. Once we were out of earshot, I leaned in close to Josh, my voice low and conspiratorial. "Boss idea with the pills, babe." Josh grinned at me, a glint of mischief in his hazel eyes. "Just doing what needs to be done, darlin'. Let's keep up the act until we're home free." It was 2 o'clock when we completed our circuit around the town's business district. We approached our van, which was parked in an alleyway beside a boarded-up, used furniture shop, and I wrinkled my nose. "Ugh, did she just poop herself again? What's that stink?" Josh prodded the old woman. "You poop your pants, Hellcat," he asked. That was all the momentum Nancy's incapacitated body needed to lurch over the side of the wheelchair onto the hard, filthy pavement, her right shoulder absorbing the impact. Nancy groaned in pain as her body hit the ground hard with a dull thud, and Josh and I snorted with derisive laughter. But the stench was overwhelming. We had utterly failed to properly maintain her hygiene during her drug-induced stupor, and we did not give a rat's behind about Nancy's dignity as a human being throughout our siege of her person or her property. "God, she's gross," I sighed. "Let's take her back so we can hose her down in the garden," said Josh. We made our way back to the house and did just that, not bothering to strip her out of her wet, filthy, crusty jeans and panties. She was half conscious and dripping wet, so we left her out in the midday sun for a few hours to dry off after Josh slammed her back into the fecal-stained wheelchair seat. "That's for the ugly scar you left on my arm, you," Josh said in a murderous tone, bent down, staring intensely into Nancy's vacant eyes. I touched his back. "Cool it, we don't want to draw any negative attention to ourselves." He slowly stood up and cautiously looked around. The neighborhood appeared to be deserted, but we couldn't be absolutely sure, so we quickly retreated into the mansion. One overcast morning, with Nancy firmly secured on her revolting bed, we ventured out to the estate's gazebo with cold, cherry-flavored Pop-Tarts we had stolen from a convenience store and 2 steaming cups of instant coffee. The gardens were lush and varied, with an endless array of strange and terrifying-looking exotic plants flanking the wooden structure. These massive plants overtook most of the estate grounds, and they flourished in a wild, primitive state. I took a long drag from my cigarette, the smoke curling around my face like a veil of uncertainty. "Something always happens to mess it all up, Josh. I will lose my shit if I go back to prison," I fumed, the fear of our carefully constructed world crumbling around us weighing heavily upon my mind. Seeing my distress, Josh set his mug down and placed his remaining pastry atop it, a silent gesture of understanding and support. "Come here," he beckoned, opening his arms to me. "It's gonna work out, baby. Trust me." I hesitated for a moment, my frown deepening as I wrestled with my doubts. With a resigned sigh, I flicked my lit cigarette into a nearby boxwood hedge and slowly made my way over to Josh, settling myself onto his lap. As our lips met in a casual kiss, a sense of fleeting comfort washed over me, if only for a moment, as we easily groped each other in the waning sunlight.